So hello there. I am super thrilled to be introducing our new guest. We made a little pivot and we're continuing with the theme of Black resistance. And I think it's timely, even though our initial idea was to keep this during Black History Month. But I've been reminded Black history is every month, every day. So we're going to continue these conversations. And our focus this month is on activism and mental health. And so I'm thrilled to have our guest today, Leon Smith, who is the Executive Director of Citizens for Juvenile Justice, a nonprofit here in Massachusetts. And I'm excited to be proud to be a member of the board. But I really wanted to invite Leon here so we could have a conversation about juvenile justice and the advocacy work they're doing in promoting better outcomes for our youth of color in particular. So Leon, can you say a little bit about who you are and a little bit about the mission of Citizens for Juvenile Justice?
Happy to. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Jackman. My name is Leon Smith, and I'm an attorney and the executive director at Citizens for Juvenile Justice. We're an independent, statewide nonprofit organization. Our mission is statewide systemic reform that achieves equitable youth justice. Key word being equitable. We understand that our systems currently do not operate in an equitable fashion and have disproportionate negative impacts on young people of color. So while we advocate to change systems and change laws and change policies to better serve all young people, we also drill down on decision points throughout the cradle to prison pipeline. We see where young people are treated inequitably, and we specifically look to reduce that inequitable treatment so that our systems can truly be justice systems, which currently, unfortunately, they are not.
Yeah. And just a quick follow-up from that. Thank you. And, so proud of the work of Citizens for Juvenile Justice, or CFJJ, as we call it. My own career really overlapped, and I did a lot of work with the juvenile justice system as a forensic psychologist. So it's so important, the work you're doing. And I'm just curious, what's the landscape? Are you getting a lot of pushback from, because I know trying to change these systems and these laws can be met with a lot of resistance. And as we think about our theme of resistance, how are you navigating that? And what are you hearing? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing in the work?
Absolutely. So we resist forces that seek to drive our young people into the legal system and into negative outcomes. So when you really look at what we resist each and every day, we resist harmful and harsh narratives that are rooted in stereotypes and that are quick to vilify our young people for adolescent behavior, or vilify our young people who have mental health challenges that are not addressed. And, young people are then framed as being bad kids or dangerous or violent, instead of being young people who are really in need. Those narratives can fuel harmful practices and ultimately bad policies that can devastate communities for generations if they're not stopped. So while we always advocate for laws and policies that can actively help young people, we are constantly resisting harmful laws that will over-criminalize our young people as well.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for that work. So, as you think about, I know, so March 2nd is World Teen Mental Health and Mental Wellness Month. Or sorry, let me get that again. So March 2nd is World Teen Mental Health Day. And so, thinking about that, all the things that you're doing at CFJJ, how does your work connect to mental health? Because sometimes people might say, well, it's juvenile justice. What does mental health have to do with it? So that's what I'm going to ask you. What does mental health have to do with juvenile justice? And how is your work tackling mental health in either explicit or implicit ways?
My work has always been intertwined, starting as a young juvenile court public defender, being an attorney in private practice, and moving to now leading an organization focused on systemic reform. When you really look at the issue of mental health and youth mental health, it's about meeting young people where they're at,
Yeah.
seeing what their needs are and getting them what they need when they need them. Because when our systems fail to do that, young people's underlying issues and the root causes of behavior escalate. And then the system wants to come in and simply punish, push out, and cast into the system and negative outcomes. When the reality, I think back to cases I had as a young lawyer where everyone was so fed up with this kid, and this is a bad kid, and we need to push them out. And then you look at their school records and you just look at the family history, and you see from the time this young person was 5 or 6 years old, their family has been saying they need help. They didn't get it. And then when that lack of help manifests, everyone wants to come down hard on the young person. So at every level, whether you're you're working on an individual level with one young person at a time or on a system level, we're saying, let's acknowledge that we've been in the midst of a youth mental health crisis brought on by the trauma and the isolation of the pandemic. Let's uplift the fact that not only advocates, but young people themselves and parents have been verbalizing that young people have social, emotional, behavioral needs, academic needs due to learning loss, which also, taps into that anxiety. Our young people need help right now. They don't need to be called dangerous and violent and all these other dog whistles that are being laid upon them. Let's get to the root and address those mental health issues that people have been really talking about needing to be addressed for some time. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Jackman.
Thank you for that. It warms my heart to hear you say that because, you talk about the system creating these conditions and then punishing the youth for their response, their natural response to the conditions under which they have had. So I think as we think about Black resistance and resistance in general, it is really, we're working to decolonize these structures to really disrupt the way that they're practicing. And I love the work because I think that I got a point in my career where for me, it was like, how do I operate in this system? Because I just felt like I was contributing to the problem, right? And so taking a step aside and really thinking about how do I want to show up in this space? What do I want to do? How do I want to change the system and the spaces and the policies that we're in? So just again, excited by the work that you're doing and advocating for.
Absolutely. And, I'm glad you mentioned that word decolonize, because even in our own community, sometimes we take on that punitive energy from these systems and the idea that we're going to punish away the behaviors that we don't like. I've always said that, with children from well-off backgrounds and with white children, people stop to ask the question, is this young person having a problem? Whereas with Black and brown young people, especially those from poor communities, we immediately say that kid is the problem. So over here, we get a lens that says, let's focus on what this young person needs and how we help them. But often our children of color, particularly those in impoverished neighborhoods, never get that grace or that empathy or that compassion. So in the spirit of resistance, one, we cannot accept that bias and that different treatment, but we also have to resist and say, oh no, stop. We're not going to go straight to punishment. To use the Monopoly analogy, we're not going to go straight to go and grasp. Right. We are going to stop and we're going to have that same lens that looks at youth need and not just coming in and accepting that punishment is the way, because we've learned that punishment only leads to more punishment, and that leads to the cycle of recidivism we don't want.
Right. And, as you're sharing, what came up for me is the humanity in our youth, and actually even more than deeper than that is the idea to see our children or our youth as youth, as adolescents, right? I think part of the problem is because our humanity has been stripped from us in these systems, that our youth are not seen as youth, they're seen as adults, right? And so they're treated that way. So
Yes, famous study, The Essence of Innocence, which showed that
mm,
that the darker a young person's skin, the older they're perceived. And,
mhm,
they would
mhm,
show photographs to people working in systems, and,
mhm,
they would see white child, Latin child, black child, same age. The white child was seen as younger than their age. And then, black children at the other end of the spectrum were seen as being sometimes 3 to 4 years older. I mean, the Tamir
mm,
Rice shooting,
mhm.
12-year-old boy,
Right,
and the
right.
police call was an 18-year-old man. And so
Wow.
and
Yeah.
so that's just an example. Our girls who are
Mhm.
disproportionately punished under dress code policies in schools,
Right, right.
um, wearing the same clothes as their
Mm,
classmates, but seen as
mhm.
older and
Older.
therefore more sexualized. So these
Yeah,
olden stereotypes, unfortunately, they govern how our kids are treated today, and we have to
yeah.
resist that.
Shift that. Yeah. So the essence of innocence. I have never heard of that one. I mean, I know the idea, right? That the data is out there and we know that, but I didn't know there was a study titled that. Remind me of the Black Doll studies in
Yes.
some ways. So
Yes.
okay. So pulling from there, thinking about the youth, I know you actually work there, you have youth who also contribute to some of the work that you're doing. I want to bring their voices into this conversation. What are they saying? What are they asking for? What are they demanding? Just share some of the stories or some of the conversations that you have with their youth as they're working to advocate and change these things within their communities, which I think is so important that they're part of the solution as well, that they're part of the conversation. What are you hearing from them?
Absolutely. And first, I just have to say is we need to listen to our young people.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a little bit of a approach out there in some parts of our community that believes young people should just be seen and not heard and follow what the adults have to say.
Mm-hmm.
When young people are closest in proximity to the issues, for example, what's happening in schools, as adults, we have to step back and we have to listen to young people, and we have to acknowledge and affirm what they want. And what's interesting, there was a recent walkout staged by students in Boston who did a walkout from their school, and they walked to the superintendent's office and they expressed what they wanted. And what young people are saying is when bias happens in their school, when people are calling them racial slurs and names, and they're not being and that's not being addressed, they want those things addressed. They want to have their schools and their spaces be inclusive environments where they are not greeted with disrespect. Young people want restorative justice to be implemented in their schools. So young people have conflicts. It's part of their development. Young people are going to have disagreements. They're going to have conflicts. And if we don't have our schools embedded with the proper supports, those can escalate to a problematic level. Young people are aware that alternatives like restorative justice, that having more counseling supports to meet their social and emotional and mental health needs, they they are at a point in their wisdom that they know that those things are needed, and they want those. They don't want more punitive. They want to have supports in place that address their needs because they are expressing their needs, that they're dealing with anxiety or depression. And young people can clearly see that there are certain schools in wealthier areas that have things that in some of our inner cities they don't. And they are calling out the inequity of that. So those are some of the things that we hear. We also, in some of our main policies, like raise the age, we want to bring older teenagers, many of whom are still in high school, into the juvenile system. Young people appreciate the fairness of that, because why should two young people in a 12th grade class, if they both unfortunately get in trouble, go to separate systems, one which is rehabilitative and one which is strictly punishment based? So we, at every opportunity, we try to have young people shape what we do, but also advocate alongside of us, because ultimately this is to make the world they're emerging into better.
Yeah, right. And it's a way to model and to empower them. Their voice
Yes.
matters. Yeah, and I hear you saying that their voice do matter, their voices matter. So I really want to just lift up the restorative justice. I have seen that work when I worked in schools, and it's also connected to the mental health piece, right? The research that we know is that the teenage brain is emergent, and it actually doesn't get fully formed until they're like 25, 26 and beyond. And so you talked at the beginning of our segment around just the harsh punishment sometimes for adolescent development behaviors that we know are impulsivity, right? It's connected to adolescence. That's long been documented. And so how are we having these permanent punitive solutions for young people who in their development or their stage of development, they further on the line, they understand that and they're able to make better decisions, better choices. And so I love that idea. And the raise the age also ties in that emerging developing brain model, right? So I think those are two
Yes.
policies that connect to mental health and to our neurobiology, and really also are more empathetic. It's using that research, using that data to inform our policies.
100%. You are going to get,
Can you come a little further? Yeah, because
yes,
closer. Thank you. Sorry.
you are going to get the best outcomes with young people when you have approaches that are developmentally appropriate for them.
Hmm.
And that's what Raise the Age is all about. When you look at 18 to 20-year-olds, they are not fully developed. They are years away from being fully developed because that
Hmm.
development doesn't finish until the mid 20s.
Hmm.
And what we've learned is 18 to 20-year-olds are they are more closer in terms of development to other younger teens than they are to the 30, 40, and 50 year
Right.
olds they are
So
grouped
they're
with in
going
the
with,
adult
yeah.
system. And so when you look at what's developmentally appropriate for them, it's having more family engagement. It's
Hmm.
having, DBT and kinds of counseling that are really rooted in addressing underlying trauma. It's what the juvenile system does, the fact that you get 5 days per week of education in the juvenile system, which you do not get in the adult system. It's really saying if the focus is really on
Hmm.
helping young people,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's not putting them in a adult jail
Joe,
without
right.
resources, without supports, and without treatment. It's keeping them with their peers, helping them finish high school, bridging them to postgraduate programming, be that college or be that vocational training. It's continuing to focus on family engagement, not on a phone
Right.
looking through glass, but like
Right.
their families there with them as they
Yeah.
do in the juvenile
Yeah.
system.
So
And
Leon,
really,
can you say what raise the age is? Because I know, but just explain really quickly what raise the age is so people listening can get
yes,
what that is.
absolutely. So raise the age. It's a policy, it's a bill currently before the Massachusetts legislature. So I'd like to give everyone at the end a plug to contact their legislators and support.
Perfect.
It looks at older adolescents, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. And it would, over a 5-year span, starting with 18-year-olds immediately, bring them into the juvenile justice system and out of the adult criminal legal system. So one of the reasons we do that is we looked at 18 to 20-year-olds and we saw that they had by far the worst outcomes in the entire criminal justice system. Recidivism rates as high as 76%, which means that more than 3 out of every 4 young people that hits an adult jail ends up right back into the system. That is a textbook sign of failure. We spend the most money to try and incarcerate those young people, and ultimately we get the worst results, because if a young person is cycling from your community into jail, that's not public safety, and it's not helping a young person's outcomes. When we looked at young people who are committed to the juvenile system until age 21, so 18 to 20-year-olds kept in the system, even though those young people had serious felony charges, their recidivism rate was only 22%, because they were getting that developmentally appropriate approach. They were getting the right counseling, therapy, family engagement, access to education. They were being treated as what they were, which was still emerging youth. And so we see that from that snapshot, this approach works better. And now we're trying to take that to a systemic level across Massachusetts, because it's going to get our young people better outcomes. It's going to prevent our young people from getting an adult record, which hamstrings their ability to get jobs and good paying jobs.
Right. Access to college and college degree, right? So all of these. Wow, that is, I mean, the data speaks for itself, right? So 76% recidivism versus 22% when they are treated as teenagers versus
Absolutely.
adults. Yeah.
So again, that anger and rage of, you got to punish these kids.
Yeah.
All you're doing is inviting more long-term issues in your community, where by treating them, you're making young people better for your community.
Great. Well, to our last question, which you already kind of set it up, right? So what can people do, right? Part of decolonizing is action. We're just not going to have these conversations, but we want you listening to have one or two concrete things that you can do to support mental health and well-being of youth involved in the juvenile justice system. So this is your time, Leon. What do you want to ask of our community?
Yes, I would love for the community to go to www.cfjj.org. On our webpage, you can go to our Take Action link. That lists all of the pieces of legislation that we are actively advocating for this session. We have pieces of legislation that deal with the juvenile legal system, but we also have legislation aimed at keeping young people out of the system that would expand diversionary opportunities, and that would seek to dismantle the school to prison pipeline and make sure young people get help at the school level so they never flow into the system. So go to our Take Action page. If you see a piece of legislation that touches your heart and you want to support it, we have information on how you can contact your elected official. We have scripts for you in talking to your elected official, and ask them to co-sponsor these bills and support these bills, which will change the game for our young people.
Awesome. I love that. And we're keeping at that one very specific action. You're going to go to the website and we'll put that in our newsletter, and sponsor, write to your representatives to co-sponsor this bill. So very concrete action step, and we will follow up with that. Thank you so much, Leon, for this conversation. I've learned so much in this last 20 minutes.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think our community will benefit from this as well. And as again, we think about our youth, and we want to empower them. We want to see their positive qualities. We want them to be able to have joyful lives as young people growing up in the system. So, it's part of all our responsibility to ensure that they have that and they have access to what they need to thrive. On that note, thank you so much, and stay tuned for other conversations around the topic of activism. Be well.